There are about 2.5 million people unemployed in this country. 2.5 million people aren't sponging off the state. Yet we get these awful TV shows about getting people back into work. There was this program in the UK, for those who are in the US listening, you probably have no idea what I'm rambling on about half the time, but in the UK we did have a program. It's actually gone to the US now. They're doing a US series called Fairy Job Mother. You know, let's get this condescending fat cow to come and tell everybody what to do. And this woman, basically, you know, her job is to teach people how to get jobs. And it's just propaganda, because we know the majority of people who lost their jobs is because of the contrived recession. Let me just play this clip and you'll understand what I'm on about.
Meet Dean Peterson and Maxine Green, who have lived off state benefits for the last 2 years.
There's no point in working. Minimum pay is that low these days. You feel like, if I go do this, am I going to make my situation 10 times worse than what it already is? And I think that is what holds a lot of people back.
But things are about to change. Employment expert Hayley Taylor is on a mission to help get Britain back to work.
People who are unemployed, they feel low in confidence, they're low in self-esteem. My job is to pick them back up, feel good about themselves again, and hopefully find employment.
Dean and Maxine say they want Hayley's help.
No one can say it doesn't get them low when they're on benefits and they can't afford to get themselves nice things, because it's not a nice feeling.
So for the next 3 weeks, she'll work with them day and night.
Tattooed, no front teeth, and a skinhead. You have got this image of a thug.
Can Hayley Taylor transform their lives?
I'm not sure whether you do want to get off it or you don't.
I do, but I'm just too scared to.
And get both Dean and Maxine a job.
I've never shook anyone's hand before.
What is the vacancy for?
He'll be doing all sorts.
If they could get through the interviews,
Oh my God, I can't take this, mate.
it would really change their lives considerably.
Hello?
Yeah, you get the idea. That's the kind of TV shows we now have in the UK to you know, get us all back into work. Not mentioning that there's a great recession. They try and pin it on the minority of, you know, people with low prospects, come from poor families, lower classes. They try and pin it on that subsector, and it's not all like that, and it's just making people feel worse. And this ogre of a woman on one of the episodes tried to get some poor kid with no qualifications, who was crippled, who couldn't do anything on computers, couldn't lift things, was somebody that quite obviously couldn't work. And she forced him to bend over when he was in pain. There, see, you can bend over, lad. Now you can work. What, you expect him to do that 9 to 5 every day? This is the propaganda. It's that we can all do something. We're all in this together. You know, even if we're there half dead, we've just got to, you know, got to help the country, because we all love the country and the big society. And the irony, of course, of it all is that this Munter is employed. Her job is to do a TV show about getting people employed. How about she gets a real job instead of being a condescending cow? But you know, you get all these private companies, private for-profit companies, who get paid to get other people jobs, and then they get paid bonuses and all sorts of other nice perks. And think about that. They have an incentive to push people into work, even if they can't work, even if the job doesn't really fit them, because they'll get paid for it. It doesn't matter if 2 weeks later the person is back out of work because it didn't work out. The job company, they've already made their money. Surely that cycle is flushing money out of the system somewhere. You know, what happens if somebody, you know, say the job-seeking company gets paid £100 for getting somebody a job, and that person loses their job straight away, and then they go back on benefits. That's minus money from the system. And I think it's also just to fudge statistics. They've set up these private job-seeking companies all around to make it seem like we're coming out of a recession, because if they're on these programs, it's not classed as being out of work. I think it's something different. It's like students are classed as in education. It's not classed as being unemployed, and they get to play around with their numbers and, oh, we're 0.1% out of recession this month. What a load of bollocks. But I tell you what I think this is all about. I think it's getting us ready for slave labour, and unfortunately I'm not exaggerating. As Bank of England head Mervyn King said, we could be paying for this for generations. And that doesn't just mean financially. This is also tied to our labour, obviously, and our production. So check out this headline. Claimants face losing benefits if they refuse a job. Kinda sounds fair. This is the government's plan to remove benefits if people refuse to take jobs offered to them through the job centres. So it sounds reasonable. But can we be sure sick people won't end up falling through the gap? What happens if some snotty cow working for the government says somebody's fit for work or can do this job, and they quite clearly can't, and then they refuse the job, and then they lose their benefits? What happens if minimum wage decreases and everyone's just forced to work for nothing? What happens if the job is literally miles away and is completely inconvenient, you know, for like a single mother? What if they just can't get there? I know that these things sound a little extreme, but these are the things we got to consider, because our government are liars. And if people have got incentives to do things, they'll do them. That's just human nature. People cut corners in all jobs. Unfortunately, some people's jobs are more important. But at a stretch, fair enough, it seems kind of fair. We just got to ensure the system isn't abused and it works. But David Cameron now says, anyone who refuses to complete a period of community work will see their handouts stopped altogether. Sorry, what? I repeat, anyone on benefits who can't find a job and refuses to complete a period of community work will have their benefits stopped. And this is where it starts to get interesting. This is taken from the Irish Times. There's lots of other headlines on the Google News list. Hundreds of thousands of long-term unemployed in the United Kingdom are to be ordered to do 30 hours of unpaid community work, such as litter cleaning and gardening, for 4 weeks each year, or they will lose their benefits. Folks, that's the start of slave labour. Even the Chinese sweatshops pay a wage. It's forced labour. So the uneducated, those that have illnesses, those that are just simply not employable, will be forced to work instead. You know, the big corporations that don't like to employ people that aren't productive, that can't get through the job interviews because they're just not the type of people they want to employ. Some people have illnesses where they've got to take regular breaks and it's just seen as a burden, and they just want to, you know, just, no, you're not working for us. That's just a fact. That's how it works. But if they can't get a job, then we don't just throw them into the workhouse. That's bordering on eugenics. We don't sterilise the feeble-minded or sick, do we? Or we might want to. Some people might want to. This is Western civilised society, or so we thought. And this has actually been going on for a while behind closed doors. I've got a stepbrother who couldn't find work. He was made redundant from a log yard, you know, where he's chopping wood. Pretty hard work. And when he was at the job centre, they came to him and said, right, you're going to work a few days at this supermarket, but we're not going to pay you benefits for those days, but you'll get a tenner from the job from the supermarket. So in essence, he was working slave labour below minimum wage for a private company that wouldn't give him the full job, just this strange fake backhanded job. If that's going on en masse, I've not really looked into it. I don't really, I'm not sure where to start. But if that's going on en masse, then we've got a problem. The idea is to get people back into work, not to allow private companies and the job centres to exploit people. I'll have this guy for a day, pay him nothing, and then in a couple of days I'll have this woman and pay her nothing. It doesn't compute. And, when they're out doing their forced community work, surely somebody else could be doing that work for a real wage. Somebody who works for the council. So what we're creating fake jobs for no money that could be real jobs for real money. But of course, community work isn't always productive, so it doesn't reduce the national debt. The point of all of this stuff, all of the cuts, all of these new policies, is about paying back the banks and the debt holders. It's not about, getting Britain to be more responsible again. It's always twisted and made to seem like, it's reasonable when it's just to pay off the banksters. Let's be fair. And all this ties into slave labour that's being pushed in UK prisons now. They've been selling it to the media that the prisoners will now earn a minimum wage. And that's almost a psyop. The headlines are like prisoners to earn minimum wage. It's a psyop. It's to demonise them, why should prisoners, get money and stuff? But at the same time, if you actually go into the articles, they don't get a minimum wage at all. It all gets siphoned off somewhere, and they get, these credits to buy just prison crap. So you have these headline psyops, and then it says, some of the money will go to victims' funds. It makes it all sound reasonable. But this is from one of the articles. Much of the money they earn will be withheld by prison governors. Some money will be used to set up victims' funds, and some could help pay for the prison system. Ken Clark, Bilderberger, said last night that prisoners would not be substantially better off. So it's just, to get money out of the prison system now. So it's essentially slave labour. And I think the main point here is, who are these prisoners going to be working for? It says in the Mirror, ministers want more firms to do business behind bars and are sending jail governors out to tout for trade. So the prisoners are going to be working for private companies. Ken Clark told Sky News, "We will make it easier for prison governors to bring more private companies into their jails to create well-run businesses, employing prisoners in regular 9-to-5 jobs." And the best quote comes from the prison minister, Crispin Blunt, who puts it rather bluntly. He said he wanted Britain to be a global leader in inviting businesses to come into prisons to take advantage of the effectively free labour. Do we really want big corporations utilising free labour from the prison system to make themselves richer? So they can move off to China a bit later. How does that benefit the average British person? And if you give prisoners jobs, that's less jobs for regular citizens, surely. These are all things we've got to consider, and they don't seem to be talked about. And of course, isn't it dangerous to have a financial incentive to put people in jail? That's the start of a prison industrial complex. And of course, we already have 12 private for-profit prisons in our country. America has loads.